thank you everybody for attending today. We are in our headquarters in Scottsdale, Arizona, so welcome, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for a really unique presentation today. Not only is the topic great, buying and selling a business, so we're going to be talking at it from both sides, but also this is a really interesting group, I would say, from at least 2 to 3 perspectives. Number one, and something we should, as a disclosure ahead of time, we realized a couple weeks ago that all the speakers are not women. And so that's unusual for Global Chamber. We almost never have an event that's like that. We had a couple ladies who almost spoke and had to back out. So I just wanted to make sure that that is a very unusual thing for us. And so our next event on this, we're going to definitely have some women, and we're going to make an extra effort on that. Another unique thing is all the speakers at this Globinar are here in Scottsdale, Arizona. They're physically present, and that almost never, in fact, I don't remember it ever happening before. So hopefully that will help facilitate the process of asking questions, etc. And we have an audience here and around the world. So what I would suggest as you hear topics or you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box, and we'll be able to process those and get those processed with this very illustrious group of 5 experts. We have about 30 minutes of presentation and about 30 minutes for Q&A. The last really, I think, unique perspective about this event is that I know all of these people, and I know some of them really, really well. And these are, when you talk about trusted advisors, I mean, this is an amazing group of 5 people. And I'm going to start by introducing Bill Miller, who is someone, and he and his firm, I've known for 10 to 15 years. I was actually part of the naming of his company, Clear Growth Capital. I've known Bill, it feels like, since he was a baby, but at least when I was a baby. Bill is really a foremost expert on mergers and acquisitions, and his team is really quite incredible. And so he's going to kick us off today and give us somewhat of an overview of both the buy and sell mechanisms, and then we're going to go down the road here with some people that are very impressive. Bill, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Miller with Clear Growth Capital. We're the securities licensed investment bank. We have a lot of experience in making transactions and placing capital, and also doing merger and acquisition work. As a matter of fact, we sold 2 large companies this year, and it was quite a journey, if you know what I mean. My purpose today is to give you a quick overview of what the process is all about and some of the statistics. What you need to know is that right now, life is full of cycles. So is the weather, and so is the economy. And right now, the economy is at a very good point for cost of capital being low, and for valuations being high for companies that either wish to merge, raise capital, or to sell. And that's not going to last but maybe another 1 or 2 years. As a matter of fact, I got back in from Orange County last night where I was talking to some clients. I went to an industry event at the Irvine Marriott, discovered that PitchBook, which is a subscriber database that we happen to subscribe to, showed that actually merger and acquisitions have never been hotter, and valuations are high, but it's beginning to plateau. And they, like everyone else in the industry, is saying that right now valuations are good, M&A activity is high, but about another, probably by the end of 19, maybe early 2020, but no one knows for sure. It could even happen tomorrow. As you know, anything can happen quickly, that the valuations are the highest. So my job today is to not necessarily scare you, but tell you that now's a good time you need to prepare. The second thing is to let you know from the Inc. 500 recent survey, most company owners are concerned 49% about valuation, and but very few are doing anything about it, only 9%. And then the Exit Planning Institute, and I have to be part of this study. You're welcome to get and download this online. I can send the link to you. They did a survey of Arizona business owners compared to Minneapolis, compared to San Diego, compared to Dallas, so on and so forth. What we discovered was Arizona business owners are least prepared of other states, and which we kind of guessed. As a matter of fact, most owners agree that 32% they need to have a transition strategy. Roughly over 50%, and yet only 60% of the owners have done no planning at all. And so the point is you have to prepare, just like when you're selling your car or you're selling your house. You fix it up, you make sure everything's orderly, and that's the same thing with a business. These gentlemen can address that. The evaluation I indicated are the highest right now, and you need to know how to prepare. There's a slide up about what we do. We're the campaign people. As a securities investment bank, we go through several stages that are extremely complex, both left brain and right brain, in making sure that a company is ready for market. We're only engaged perhaps a year or a year and a half on a sell side engagement, perhaps 3 months on the capital placement. But as you can see from the chart there, there's the preparation stage where we talk to owners, we prepare their information for market, we choose the investors or potential buyers, then we go out to the market. We do a very focused campaign, and that is true of all investment banks. At least I hope they do that as well. We also give weekly reports, and now I'm not here to talk about clear growth. I'm here to tell you that you need to understand the process of finding the right buyer. The next is trying to orchestrate site visits and do conference calls and things of that nature, and then finally handling due diligence. Now, as I indicated, that's only a 6 to 12 month campaign. But there needs to be preparation for business owners about a year in advance, easily. And because a lot of business owners are looking at such things as, what's your revenue? Has it been stable? Number 2, what's your earnings? Number 3, what's your what niche you're in? And that would be to tell you what multiples that your company will sell for. They'll look at your intellectual property, even if it's not patented. They want to know that you've got an edge over your competition. Next, they want to know about your management team. We always tell business owners, make sure you're expendable. With your company, run well if you're gone for 2 months. If it will, it'll add a lot of value to the company. Make sure you have a good management team. You need to know have your financials prepared, make sure they're at least reviewed, if not audited. Then your investment bank will do a much better job, hopefully clear growth, in preparing you for market because we recast the numbers. But let me tell you, buyers and investors look at the P&Ls, and if they're generated and reviewed or audited financials by a CPA firm, it'll make a lot of difference in your valuation. They'll look at your revenue profile, how much of it's reoccurring, do you have a concentration of customers, concentration of revenue. And then finally, they will look at your cost of acquisition of clients, things of that nature. They want to know the conversion ratio, what's the debt on your balance sheet. So your investment bank can get all of that ready for you, but if you haven't prepared a year before, all we can do is present what is actually presented to us. We can't lie. We've got a credibility issue. There's 5,000 institutional funds in the world, and there are thousands of companies that would buy your company or invest in it. And so when we go to market, we've got to make sure we're prepared. And if you prepared about a year in advance, working with some of the gentlemen that are here, it'll make a lot of difference. Buyers don't like surprises, just like you don't like a surprise if you go to drive a used car, or if you go look at somebody's house and you discover during the inspection that there's a leaky roof or something like that. So you've got to prepare. But they do like to know that you've shored up everything, you've given it some thought, you're ready, and you're open to suggestions. One last thing, and that is the business owners need to be aware. When you sell your company, you don't have to sell it on day one. We throw the keys on the table at closing. There's such a thing as a control sale, where a group, a corporation, or a private equity group with a family fund or even a retirement fund buys a part of your company, and maybe they buy 30% the first year. The second year, they buy another 10%, the third year, so on and so forth, or a certain revenue milestone. It has a lot of advantages to owners and tax benefits. It allows them to prepare better, get more bites of the apple, as we say in the industry. So there's a lot of ways to sell your company, and it doesn't have to be just, gee, I'm walking out the door, and the next day I'm a rich and relevant guy or lady. So start preparing now, start getting ready. Be aware that multiples are the highest I indicated. It probably won't last but another 2 years. Quick story, we had a client in 2012 that we had in 2010. He turned down a very good offer. No, it's 12. We started with 14. He turned down 2 good offers in each year, and now his revenue is way down because his industry is not as relevant as it used to be. Another gentleman we were talking to with a tech company, he was talking to us. He was probably about 80. He was obviously thinking about retiring. Unfortunately, got ill, passed away. The wife had to take it over. She never run the business before. So don't be prepared, whether you're buying a partner out or you're preparing for your own retirement or a gradual retirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. And then in terms of your breadth of where do you do business typically? Because you're from Texas, aren't you?
Yeah, Bill. No, I'm originally from Houston. But we're based here in Scottsdale. We focus on Houston, Austin primarily, and mostly Arizona and Southern California, followed by Houston, Austin. However, we're doing a lot of work now in Utah, working with the Utah client for big capital placement in the Denver area. So we primarily focus on the West, but we also have a client in New York under a fluke.
California.
Yes, yeah, and we sold one in California. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Our next speaker has something in common, Bill, with you, your Houston connection. Amrish, is part of his education, was at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas, which is not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. Amrish elevated himself from those days out of Beaumont, and now his practice is here in the Phoenix metro area, I believe actually in Tempe. And you really help people with wealth management issues, which relates not only to buying and selling, but many other things. So Amrish, thank you for taking the time today. You're the CEO founder of Global Wealth Strategies, and you have pioneered something called financial engineering, and I would imagine you'll be talking about that today. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, Bill, for giving us the lead. As I said, I own advisory services business, which is to create peace of mind. As a business owner, everybody gets into the business with absolutely hope to create something out of it. Nobody buys a business to sell for a loss, right? So as an advisory firm, we engage with our clients before they went to buy the business, and really assessing their ability financially, emotionally, capability. So I believe in cases that have to have a clarity of focus in terms of what you want to achieve. Most of the business owners have passion, and that passion is in terms of like they're getting into the business. They really need a dream team around them to really make that dream about the passion realize in terms of some what we call wealth. Second aspect of that is that when you have the passion, you want to make sure that you have really the capabilities yourself. So we work together with our clients who want to be in the business or who are in the business to create the capabilities which is not average but absolutely exceptional is the norm for the clients that we work with. And ultimately, when the business is, they buy the business, we work with them to create the value. Because everybody buys into a business with absolutely, there is only certain thing in life is that you will sell. Nobody kind of like buys a business, this is going to be a perpetual kind of business. So what we really work with our client is to really understand the value creation process. So our involvement with the client is before buying the business. At the time of buying the business, we work with our colleagues who are sitting here because of the capital market. We also work with our clients during the value creation process, and I'll go into the value creation as financial engineering as mentioned. And at the time of the sale, the most critical decision is that, do I have the right value? Did I achieve what I started to achieve in this business? And that value proposition, value creation is extremely important in making the decision when to sell. I totally agree with Bill in saying that planning is a big process. People don't plan to exit out of business. They think, I'm going to die with this business. The most critical thing is that you wanted to achieve something, what I call safety and security for your retirement, for your family. So the wealth creation for the business has to have a purpose. And the purpose is what we concentrate on working with our clients during this process of owning the business. And so how do they create this value? Once the value is achieved, what is the process? A typical business owner has three choices in terms of selling the business. Sell to a third party, sell to an employee who works with them, or sell to one of the family members they're grooming to take over the business. Let's go through this process in detail. Selling to a third party, you may get a lot of money all up front. Selling to an employee, you might be able to sell, but you have to wait for the money. You have a peace of mind that what you created is going to continue. Well, talk about selling to the family members. Of course, I don't want to insult anybody who's doing that here, but selling to the family, maybe you never see the money, and when the business does not continue, because that family member has totally different interest. So our involvement with our client is to really work through identifying what is the exit strategy. Is there any of these three? Once we determine one of these three, we work with them to really say, if it is a third party, how do you prepare yourself to receive the large sum of money that you expect from the sale? What is the way of receiving? Is this for the wealth transfer, gifting? Is this something that is going to secure retirement? How do you minimize the taxation part of it? So there are so many parameters in terms of the business owners who need to be involved for buying, creating the value, and selling. So we work with them to really make them understand that that decision of selling is appropriate timing-wise. Once they basically go through that process, it's all about, typically people will have 5 to 10 years of dream that, okay, I'm going to create the value, I'm going to exit of that, right? The retirement is 30 years, 40 years. Is the price at which I'm selling is going to last for me, my survivors, or maybe passing the wealth to the next generation? What is the right value at which I'm ready to sell? So these are the kind of very personal decisions that we work with our clients to ask, make sure that they're well prepared. Many of you have come across your clients where they sold the business very nice and said, I'm lost. I don't know what else to do because all my life what I've done is be in my business. Now I don't have that business anymore. What do I do? So they feel empty. So this decision of selling has to be planned, prepared, and understood that you role play that if I'm not in that business tomorrow, what am I going to do, right? Lastly, like all these processes requires tremendous teamwork. We make sure that this process, we work with our clients, and I'll give specific examples. I worked as an engineer for the first 17 years. When I was an engineer, because of my passion for finance, I used financial knowledge in the engineering work. Now that I switch gear towards the financial aspect of wealth management, I use engineering knowledge. What does that mean from engineering? We always believe engineering is a problem solving. Business owner has plenty of problems. Most of the value creation process starts with the dream, the passion, it's optimism. No business owner really buys something that says, okay, I'm going to lose money. Our colleagues here in capital market are the first point which kind of gives them maybe the negative news or maybe even food for thought that have you understood this risk? And I'll kind of exemplify that. When you borrow the money and you basically buy this business with the leverage, the capital market is the one who's going to tell them what is the risk. Can they sustain the business during the life of the business, right? Their optimism is kind of like managed by the capital market, and I appreciate that. Because that is extremely critical for them to know what they have missed, right? During the process of value creation, creating the dream team requires them to wear many hats. And that knowledge is extremely critical because there is some concept called no man's land. Every small business wants to become a mid-sized business. Every mid-sized business wants to become a large. And we know statistically that 80% of the businesses fail, transitioning from small to medium, medium to large. What does it take? And I typically walk them through 4 M's. It's management, money, model, and market or the material, depending on the type of the businesses. That make sure that all these 4 M's are in your possession in order for you to come out of a trajectory which will take you from small to medium, medium to large. Lastly, selling point. When does the selling occur? In 2005, PricewaterhouseCoopers had statistics that everybody in the said it's a perfect time, value is created, we want to exit. Only 50% of the businesses were able to sell at the price at which they wanted to sell. Why is that? Because it's not just seller's market, it's buyer's market too many times. And buyers also want to value that, like in the city of Scottsdale, if I have a business to sell and there are competitions exist in the city, why would a buyer come and buy my business? So that's the first question that I ask my client. Why would they buy your business? What is above average? What is the value proposition that you have, right? So creating value which probably puts them on the top echelon in terms of all the potential businesses that any buyer can buy is a very critical aspect of being prepared for the sell. And when you sell, the right formation, the trust, duty, taxation, we strive to really work with our clients to make sure that they have prepared themselves to understand the wealth management beyond the business ownership. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrish. Our next speaker is right next to you. Mike Patterson is an attorney at Fane, and he is an extraordinary attorney. He has been focusing in on cross-border work, security work. He does licensing work. We talked earlier about actually having him speak about licensing in 2019 because of his expertise there. He works with clients on market entry, and you speak Spanish. You lived in Latin America for 10 years, and you sing Spanish. And he's actually a really good singer as well. So Mike Patterson with Fane, thank you for joining us.
We won't sing today. Doing a deal between Phoenix and a Houston company would be pretty simple. We get the company cleaned up. Thanks for mentioning you. You do your Dropbox. You have all your ducks in a row with all your legal documents. That's the first thing they're going to want to take a look at. And with a Texan company, we just have to translate it to Texan, and then we're able to get the deal done, right? But doing an international deal with a country other than Texas can be a little more complicated. First thing I ask, next slide, is what is the purpose of the relationship, the expansion? Why am I acquiring this business? Why are they acquiring me? Do they intend to expand into North America? Am I intending to expand into Europe or Canada or Latin America? Is that really my goal? Well, there are other ways to skin that cat. Do you really want to buy the business? Do you want to have a distribution relationship, manufacturer's rep, joint venture? And by the way, one of the first things we ask as lawyers and investment banking community is, do I really want to be doing an asset purchase here, just buying the assets, not the liabilities? Or do I want to acquire for some reason, maybe they've got a key registration or IP that has to go with the stock, so you buy the stock or something. There's ways to skin that cat, but I do want to say it's not the same in every country. We have clear rules here in the U.S., distinctions between asset purchase and equity purchase. It may not be the same in a certain Latin American country. I did an asset purchase, but now a regulatory agency is still looking at me as if I acquired the business almost as an equity. Those liabilities go with it. The employees went with it. You need to really look at that in the structure. Next slide. You remember from the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore, and you didn't take your U.S. system with you. A lot of people don't realize I've done 9 M&A deals. We've got our set of forms, and we'll just translate those into Japanese or Spanish, and we're good, right? Well, our system has a UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. We have a lot of implied rules in the U.S. that we have developed over the years that if this term isn't in the agreement, there's one that's worked out in our code between parties. You don't take that system with you when you go to a foreign country, so you need to write your own code in a really good agreement that spells everything out specifically, and that's what I do. And particularly, we have rapid dispute resolution systems here. When something breaks down, we run and get an injunction, or we stop this, cease and desist, audit rights, things like that. When you're trying to audit somebody in Argentina, it doesn't work the same way. And when you're trying to put a cease and desist against someone who bought your business but they didn't pay for it and they stopped paying, and you want them to stop using your name in Mexico, you just can't run down to a court and make them stop. It's not the same way. Okay, next slide. Doing it right, do your due diligence. This is one of the biggest, hardest areas going international. How do I actually find out who this is? I got just a story. I helped a Midwestern company in the U.S. here buy a manufacturing line in Mexico a couple of years ago. We had the closing here in Phoenix. We're sitting out on the patio at Cityscape and having a beer in the evening after everything got closed and everything. And the executives of my acquiring company turned to the Mexican executive on the other side who was selling and said, so when does your flight leave in the morning? Ours leaves at 6 a.m. And he turned to his son and said, son, when do you want to leave? Our private jet parks at Deer Valley Airport. And so in other words, know who you're dealing with. These guys assumed, that he was flying coach and, American Airlines. He had his jet and brought his whole team. It was a magnate. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They hadn't gone to that level. But anyhow, use the U.S. Commercial Service. They have a couple of really great products to do an international company profile of these people, or a gold key service. If you want to go to that country and buy this or that, engineering company in Colombia, for $800, they'll take you down there. They'll do the research ahead of time and set you up in your hotel and bring 6 candidates in and introduce you, and do the whole thing for you. What do I want to know about those people? Are they litigious? Are they solvent? Do they have the experience? The relationships and reputation? Are they going to be able to pay me? Are they connected to the government? Mexico on December the 1st is, if you haven't noticed, is having a radical change to a populist leader. Anybody who was connected to the government yesterday is not connected to the government December the 2nd in Mexico. These things change. What other businesses does this person, the seller, the buyer, have that might conflict with this sale or getting this thing done? The big issues, next slide, tax presence. Am I subjecting myself to tax presence in Canada, in France, by doing this deal? Do I want that? Do I have a separate legal structure? The labor and employees, as much as I want those employees to be just the employees of a maquila or of the subsidiary I'm acquiring in that other country, does the host country deem me to be a secondary employer, a joint employer along with that entity? Intellectual property, can I really control it? How am I getting paid if not in cash all up front? Earnouts, and what hooks do I have to make sure in that country that we get paid to stop this and get it back if I don't get paid? Can you own this company in that country? I'm a foreigner. I probably can't own a petroleum business in certain Latin American countries. I probably can't own a telecom company in certain Latin American countries. There are real estate in restricted zones along the coast in Mexico. Can I own in fee simple? Do I have to own through a bank? Licensing and registration. I was talking to someone earlier. Do I need to have a intermediary to hold my licenses in that country so I don't have tax presence, but so that my distributor 4 years from now says, you can't cancel my contract or the person I'm selling to? I don't care what the contract says. Give me $4 million or I'm not giving them back to you. And come get me. And then the language of the contract and the jurisdiction. What language is in? Is it dual column? Which language controls? Let's see, just one other thing. Repatriating funds back. You got to know strategies. Last slide, Doug. Each country may have withholding rates that are different for distributions coming back, royalties coming back for licensing, loans on promissory notes, principal and interest, consulting agreements where I send down my key gal to their female executive, excuse me, Michelle, to their jurisdiction, and we're going to charge for her time. There's a withholding rate on that. Purchases of equipment and technologies, transfers of customers' contract rights. By the way, when you're doing due diligence, you want to make sure that restrictive covenants, the non-competes and all that kind of stuff, that certainly doesn't work the same in those countries as it does here. Let's look at that. And then transfer pricing. There's accountants in this room. On every single one of these issues where there's money flowing across borders, you need to have done the transfer pricing up front, because the IRS in our country is not going to let you come up with that study when they say, hi, we're here to audit. They want you to have done that when you decided that it was 4% 3 years ago when you started doing that. Okay, so that's enough for now. We'd love to help you.
That was extraordinary. I think we all need to sit down. That was really good information, and all our panel is just extraordinary, including our next speaker, Kevin Hull, who's a senior relationship manager at BMO Harris Bank. He's actually been in banking for over 30 years. He's been in the Midwest. He's been in the southwestern U.S. He works with companies in the U.S. and around the world. He works with manufacturers, exporters, and a variety of technology companies, and really anybody. He's just really great at what he does. And Kevin, we really appreciate you sharing your knowledge today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm so glad to see a full house, and I'm sure there's a lot on the webinar as well, so welcome. So far, we've heard a lot about preparation, and that's kind of a common theme. And just so you know, we didn't get together ahead of time. So this is the preparation. The theme was kind of done individually, and it kind of shows how important it is. So preparing well in advance of the actual event, where your buyer or seller is key to this. As we just saw from Mike, I mean, that was quite the laundry list of things that have to be done, and there's really nothing on that list that you could skip. I mean, they're all very, very important, as you alluded to earlier. So what I wanted to do is focus on a few key things from the seller perspective, but also from a buyer perspective, things that you should be looking at before you get to that critical financing stage. So from a seller perspective, I think it's key. You want to develop your exit strategy. I would develop more than one strategy because things change over time. But develop that strategy very, very early on in the life of the company. I read an article not too long ago. The author recommended the strategy should be done the day you incorporate the company. Now, I don't know if I agree with that kind of timeline, but they have their rationale for it. But the message was start early, and that part I would agree with so much. This morning I shared an article on my LinkedIn page. The article is from our BMO Private Bank group, and it talked about exit strategies and succession. And the article quoted a PwC Price Waterhouse survey. I thought it was interesting. In the article they mentioned several years ago, the number one strategy for transferring ownership was to family members. Today, that was 75%. 75% of respondents to the survey said their number one strategy was transferring to family members. Today, that number is 41%. And it's forecasted to go even lower. Hence, kind of the need to have more than one strategy involved. Because you may think the family's going to take over, but then the family goes a different direction. You don't want to be caught flat-footed. About a month ago, I was on a panel similar to this, and one of the presenters was from a private equity firm, and he quoted a stat, and I'm going to paraphrase. So roughly for every 10 transactions or 10 opportunities that they look at, they'll only pursue one or two. So if I'm a seller and PE is my number one strategy, I have an 80 to 90% chance of not getting there. That's pretty high. So 80 to 90% not going PE route, 60% not going family route. The other responses that I see, it's family PE or I don't know. So it takes some time to develop the strategies because there's a host of potential buyers. It's not always family or PE. It can be employees. It can be suppliers. It can be competitors. It could be somebody in that whole vertical integration chain there that could be a potential buyer. All those potential buyers have different ways, relatively different ways, of looking at a company and valuing the company. And there's also different multiples that they use too. So it does make sense to work with professionals and go through those different strategies and understand how they're going to look at the company. What does that mean in terms of a potential valuation? Making sure it's meeting your expectations. So, and speaking of valuation, I would encourage every business owner to have a valuation done periodically throughout the life of that company. Start early, and you don't have to do it every year. Start early, see what's in the report, and work towards getting to the number where you want it to be. Every so often, have an update done to that. Markets change, industries change, a lot of things change in the world as we've seen, and much more rapid today than what it used to change. So your multiples may change. When that valuation is done, more often than not, the owner's going to be a little disappointed in that number, right? I mean, for those of you who have been in this process, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. go deep into that report. And what are the factors that are driving the value? It just could be point in time with multiples. Industries have cycles. Businesses will have cycles. Then multiples will follow those cycles. Could be that you're at the lower end of the cycle. Maybe the multiples aren't quite as high as it would be during a more robust cycle time. So not much you can do to control that other than just be aware and maybe focus on some timing there. The thing that's looked at, a lot of multiples are applied to EBITDA, right? What's the company's EBITDA? If your EBITDA number is not quite where maybe industries are or companies within your industry, you have some time to work on that. Work on profit margin, work on OpEx, work on some things, perhaps revenue expansion, to try to get that EBITDA number up a little bit higher. And that way you're more on par or even above par with some of the companies in your industry. Things that buyers will look at is there a concentration of suppliers, concentration of clients. That can have an impact on their assessment of the company. So it may make sense if you have the ability to kind of expand that a little bit, or at least if you're concentrated on the supplier side, have some relationships with backup suppliers to make sure that doesn't become an issue. The other thing, and I see this a lot with small, medium-sized enterprises, is concentration of the owner. The owner is the chief salesperson, chief marketing officer, IT, HR, all those things. A lot of things focus around the owner. So if I'm going into looking at a company I want to acquire, and the client relationships are centered around that owner, and some of the other key components of that business are centered around the owner, that's going to make me a little skittish maybe to go forward with that. So from an owner perspective, you kind of have to diversify a little bit and get those responsibilities a little more broad-based amongst your management team or key employees. The more broader base that is, the less hesitant I think a buyer will be. The other thing, I'll hit some highlights on, and we'll talk about things buyers should look at too. Quality of financial statements, it really does matter. If I'm looking at 5 or 6 companies and one has an audit, one has a review, and 3 others have compiled or internal QuickBooks or whatever, guess where my focus is going to be? Nothing wrong with QuickBooks, great service, but you're probably going to go concentrate a little bit more on the audited company, the reviewed company. So if you're early in the life cycle of the company, yeah, you probably don't want to pay for a full-blown audit. But as you go forward in that cycle time, I want to graduate from compile to review and eventually audit. Definitely audit if you have a specific time frame in mind. If I want to sell my company in 2025, by about 21, 22, I'm probably going to get towards review or audited statements. So what does everybody want? 3 years financials, right? So small, medium-sized enterprises, if you're an owner, expect to carry some of that debt. Variety of reasons. Maybe you can't finance 100% of that acquisition. Maybe the buyer wants you to have some skin in the game a little bit. There might be some parameters that need to be hit in order to get the rest of that funding back. So don't be shocked if you're going to be asked to carry back some of that debt. No seller likes to. I'd want to sell 100% and go. But the reality is most sellers are being asked to. Quick thing to consider, again, SME, small, medium enterprises, ownership, they own their building, they own their business, usually 2 separate entities. Your buyer may not want the real estate. Have a plan and strategy in place. If that's the case, you still want to sell the company, what are you going to do with the building? You're going to sell, you get this back, you're going to do a few of those other things. A couple of quick things on the buyer side. Again, just as important for the buyer to put a strategy in place early as it is for the seller. On the buyer side, focus on integration, not just systems, but people, reporting, management, and what I think is the most important, culture. Whether it's 2 domestic firms coming together, whether it's an international and domestic firm coming together, culture is so key on that. It's often overlooked. And I think as you lead up to that acquisition, you get an understanding of the culture, and that post-acquisition, having an understanding of the culture. And one may ask, how in the world do I know the culture, before acquisition? A lot of it will come out in your interviews of the management team and ownership. I think a lot of it will come out if you have a chance to interview some of the employees as well. But looking at policies, procedures, training, compliance, things like that, they give you some insight into the culture of the company. How important is training and advancement for the employees? How important are, policy manuals and the preparation of those and sharing them with the employees? So it gives you kind of an insight into the culture of the company there. So real quick, by funding the acquisition, the buyer side, meet with your bank very often on a periodic basis and talk about your borrowing capacity. So that way the bank can sit down with you and say, okay, based on what we're seeing today, in terms of cash flow and assets or whatever, your borrowing capacity can be up to this dollar. Now you kind of know, as you're looking at an acquisition target, and without knowing what the potential cash flow can be from the acquisition, you kind of got to feel, okay, what's financeable, what's not. And if the number's a little bit softer than where you want it to be, well, you have time to make some of those adjustments so you can increase your borrowing capacity. You don't want to get to an LOI stage and then the bank is like 50% where you need to be. You want to have that resolved before you get to that LOI stage. It's not clear, so thank you.
Awesome, Kevin. Thank you very much. Our last speaker is Ziv Bendor. He's the managing partner at Pinewell Capital. And so Ziv he runs an interesting life, and this is why we put him last, is that his life is involved with the deal sourcing, basically, what deals can we do as an entity, strategy formulation, which, what types and where are the markets going, and then finally, operational support. So he jumps right in. He's working at these companies that they acquire. So Ziv, thank you for joining us today and appreciate your participation.
Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for everyone. And if I knew how many times I was going to nod, I would have massaged, I would have stretched a bit, because I think everything that they said is important. So you want to buy or sell a business, get ready for a ride. It can be very long. It's dynamic. The permutations are endless. Everything depends on something else. So on the first slide, I think what I wanted to convey to you is choose the right orbit of advisors and folks. By the way, including who, if you have the luxury of selecting buyers or flip sellers, choose that as well if you can. It really matters who you go to back with, because again, it's not going to be easy. And it's also very emotional, especially if you've been running a business for decades. It's part of your identity. It's intertwined. And I believe a few folks discussed what do you do on day one if you're not part of that entity. It's not an easy thing to go through. So in terms of what we see, we typically go out, we look for businesses. I'm not going to get into their criteria because it depends. But we like to find typically companies that in our space, it's manufacturing, value-added assemblers, small and medium. And then there's just a lot of it depends in terms of does it excite us or does it not. But the only common thread, it's a long process. So in terms of choosing, when I kind of thought about it, brokers and advisors, there are brokers and advisors we worked with that added significant value through this process. And it's many, many months. And there are some that destroyed the value, jeopardized the deal. And if it wasn't for the relationship that we established with the actual founder, it wouldn't have gotten done. And it's not for anybody, malicious intent. There's just inherent differences. There's communication styles. The more dynamic this process is, the broken telephone, we all played it as kids. I played with my kids. It doesn't work. We all know. And it's difficult to convey complex messages. So I would say the main takeaway that we find is extremely valuable when you think about brokers, investment bankers, it's then being able to modulate as they help advise you as opposed to manage and micromanage everything. They know when to step in and help, and they also know when to back out and let us have a discussion. Because if we buy the company, and especially if you're a part of it, and we actually do like that, our relationship is years long. It doesn't end when you get the check and we get the keys to the shop. So the relationship is important. So know when an advisor can step back and also jump in. You'll need all of that. In terms of buyers, so folks like us, there are a lot of different personalities. And we think the people side of things a lot of times is not emphasized. And at the end of the day, that I think that's what can make the process successful and somewhat enjoyable versus very difficult. So things like integrity, things like openness and transparency are very, very important. For us, one of the things that we care about, even if the financials look great, the industry looks great, management team looks great, if we don't have a connection, we're done. So the connection with the people matter. And again, we look at this as many years, so if we don't enjoy going to work with these individuals, it's not going to be fun. So try to find and try to tease out what are things that are important for you. Again, that depends is if you're looking for a true exit and you're done, different story. You may be then looking to optimize your value, different type of buyers potentially. And you have a lot of advisors who can help you on what are the types of buyers, and then when you have the suite of buyers, who to select. Some of the pitfalls that we see a lot, what we call bait and beat down. So it's very easy to throw around a value. And if I'm interested in a company, it's very easy for me to just give you a valuation, like on a house. You like the house, I'll just give something to you because I know there's competitors. That pushes out the competitors. We're locked in, and now we're starting this long process. And then we see this getting the seller gets beat down. As we get into the financial, we have a lot of information. We'll know everything. So don't hide things, by the way. We'll know everything. Maybe you don't want to say everything up front, right? Get us excited, but make sure that you don't hold anything back, especially of material value. We will find it, and you don't want it later. But this tactic, it's pretty nasty. We encounter it, and we just back away. We also just kind of do a courtesy and let people know this happens. We've seen it. We always offer fair value. We're not going to undersell. We're not going to over bid. But if we see something that doesn't make sense, we'll just humbly say, look, folks, you may be in this tactic. You'll get beat down, and you'll either walk away or you'll sell for less than what fair would be from, let's say, us or other folks who are like-minded. The other one is, if you built a company over years and sometimes decades, how much does your legacy matter? For us, that's one of the things we like about family businesses, about entrepreneurs that have been in the business. It's actually taking a legacy and seeing how can we grow it. So there are buyers who will just swallow that legacy up, just part of a big cog, like this is a small little wheel in it, versus somebody or a buyer who would help to perpetuate that legacy, would be good to employees. There's a lot of other factors on the softer side of things than just kind of the hard numbers, which are always easy to talk about because they're tangible. And then also from a buyer's perspective, if you want to read between the lines of their intentions, are they a growth-minded investor or buyer, or are they financial engineering? There's value to both. There's success on both sides, but there's different approaches. And by the way, financial engineering, there's different contexts to use it. I'm not sure if we're discussing it in the same way, but financial engineering, it's if we take, or not we don't typically do that at Pinewell, but it's about extracting maximum value. So employees could get impacted, vendors may get impacted. It's typically of creating value very rapidly through the balance sheet. Growth-minded would be more around, and this is what we like, this is what we get excited about. That's why I like to roll up my sleeves and get involved with the companies to a degree. It's how do we grow that legacy? How do we grow what this individual or a partnership has done? How can we take it to the next level? So that's investing in people, in resources, in markets, products, etc. That to me is reading between the lines, because they say one thing and it seems like they're really focused on the financial engineering, or that's their track record. It just, there's a dissonance. And if we can go to the next slide, in terms of the advisors, the CPA, a lot of small, medium businesses have CPAs. Over the many years that you may have worked with them, they may become your buddy. That's great. They're a good advocate. We work with CPAs, again, that added value. We've had some that destroyed a lot of value. And it comes down to what is their role, and they should know that role. If they are not an M&A professional, mergers and acquisition professional, they should help you see things the way they truly are to outsiders. It's good to advocate for you, but at some point, if they keep cheerleading, again, we'll know what's going on. It becomes destructive because then the expectations when you sell it are very high. And that delta between expectations, which are unrealistic, and where the market is too big. By the way, and advisors help with that as well. Again, we've seen it work both ways. So very important for them to know. They're not an owner. They're not a business owner. A lot of them, if they're an entrepreneur, it's just a different type of risk that they assume. So don't let them step into that role. and they're not legal counsel. And that's a very important point, and that's a transition to the next part. A lot of folks say, let's bring the legal team at the end, because it's expensive. And we're a proponent of bring them as soon as you can. It actually may be cheaper, because when you hire any professional, they want to add value. They know their work. They're that's Mike, he knows his space. If you bring somebody like Mike later, after we hammered out a lot of things, Mike may say, hey, guys, that is a non-starter. This is a massive risk for you. That's a problem. The whole deal is jeopardized. Also, the types of things that we care about, the risks we want to protect, are very different than, let's call it, general, just business day-to-day activities, which the founders a lot of times are very familiar with. M&A is very different. So they'll help to guide you to the true north. These things matter. These things you just don't focus on. There's some other pitfalls we've seen, and we've seen this both on the seller side as well as on our side. Business-minded versus legal-minded counsel. The business-minded help you, in my mind, they help you kind of get through the noise. And the legal is all the things that could go wrong, you'll have to encounter. A meteor can crash at this angle, and then somebody, instead of hitting the bus, I got to do something different. And then what are you going to do? Right? That probability exists. It's very low, so I don't care about it. I don't want to deal with it. So I'm using kind of an extreme example or an analogy, but business-minded will help you focus on what's important, and legal-minded you'll be flooded. So again, bring them early on, even as little advisors, and along the way they can get more into it. Eventually they'll get really into it. The last thing, just other important factors, and we can get into this if you're interested in Q&A. And again, these small list, and my colleagues mentioned a lot of other things that we care about when we go to buy a business. Size, to some degree, it's just a litmus test of risk, of the systems that are in place typically, the management teams that are in place. The smaller it is, typically the more reliant it is on one individual, which is a lot of risk. And typically, you don't get money for that risk. You don't pay a premium for risk, so you get a discount. And there's these thresholds in the private equity world where you can kind of say if you reach this threshold, you'll see higher valuations. Again, it's an indication of risk. It's an indication of other assets that the company has that can help whoever buys it step in and have a smoother ride. Concentration, customer, geography, industry. You can slice and dice concentration in many ways. It just depends on your business. We look at usually businesses in North America. We recently completed an acquisition, and this was a divestment from a larger corporation. It was in Europe, but the entity is here in the U.S. But it depends what they do. Sometimes geography matters, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes customer mix matters, sometimes it doesn't as much. So that matters. And again, when we talked about preparing ahead of time, this is one of the areas you can prepare for. Macro trends matter. And we talked about cycles. Industries, even if it's a down cycle generally in the economy, some industries are still going to boom. Yeah. That could be a good time. So macro trends matter, again, all around the risk. And finally, succession. It's very challenging as an outsider. We'll never know your business like you know your business after years or decades. We'll never know what's under the hood, nor what's under that, and how are the valves working, and are they oiled, and did you oil them throughout the time? We'll never know that. The more reliant it is on one individual, the higher the risk, and therefore the lower the valuation. And the last thing I'll say, because I can go on forever and kind of missed up above, when you're preparing your company, make sure you have a fog-free mirror. And what I mean by that is the industry almost always gravitates to give you value based on EBITDA, margin. How you look at EBITDA as a sole proprietor or in a partnership is to optimize your tax situation. It's expected. You also want to take perks. It's your business. Take them within legal, within the legal realm. That said, when we look at it, or any buyer looks at it, try to, and this also is where we have delta in expectations, look at your business as if it was publicly traded. So there are no perks, because that doesn't happen in publicly traded. If your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife work there, but that's more of a way to optimize taxes. If it's not a role that has a true value-adding component, that doesn't exist. And we see that a lot. And that's fine for you as an individual, but don't set your expectations on it. Reduce it, because that body will have to be filled. And same thing with the executive compensation. If you leave, that has to be reflected because the company doesn't operate itself. It needs somebody at the top or a team at the top. So those are just some of the things, and I think I'm assuming that these will be shared, but we can discuss around that. So again, when you look at a partner, especially a buyer, make sure that they can discuss these things with you. You'll come up with road bumps. Having the right people in front of you, advisors as well as the actual buyer, matter. Because there's a lot of road bumps. And from our perspective, we've always overcome them through transparency, discussions, because then we often see that the pie can be expanded. And therefore, you can slice and dice in different ways. So creativity matters. I'll stop there because I can go.
Thank you, Sid. We're almost out of time, so we're going to go over a little bit. So hopefully that works for everybody. We do have a lot of questions, so we can't ask all of them. I ask if anybody here in the audience has a question, come around here and either hand me a note or ask the question on the screen. So the first question actually is building off something you said and several of you said. You said the word connection, that you need to have a connection, which the questioner is asking around how do you handle issues? They assumed it was a human connection so that you could have an honest, point of contact and you develop a bond, if you will. Is that where you were going? Because several of you talked about working with these buyers and sellers, and there's a lot of humanity involved with this. It's more than just numbers. So could you talk a little bit about what you meant by that, and maybe anybody else wants to talk about how important is the human factor in all of this?
Sure. So yes, it's definitely the human-to-human connection. And we've talked about cultures as well. I'm a strong proponent of when you encounter people, you get a feel for them. Trust your gut, trust your instinct. If the feel is not positive, if you have no other alternative, evaluate it, assess it. If you have alternatives, don't go with it. I always kind of look, and I was in an industry for a decade that you usually work 14, 18-hour days, you travel every week, it's brutal. And what kept me there for close to a decade, the average is 2 years, is that I enjoyed waking up 3 a.m. to hop on a flight on Monday for a 20-hour day because I was going to go work with my friends. So to me, the people side of it matters. Our investors have been with us for a very long time. They had companies for decades. They invested in employees that have known them their whole lives. Those things matter because road bumps are expected. It's a given. It's not even expected. It's a given. And if you don't have the right partner to discuss things with, and all the things behind it, the integrity, the trust, the openness, working to problem solve and increase the pie, because that a lot of times happens, that's a frame of mind as opposed to zero-sum game. My gain is your loss and vice versa. I'll let my colleagues jump in, but that's important.
I've heard, Bill, you mentioned that quite a bit.
Yeah. So as an investment banker, when we're representing the owner of the company to raise capital or to sell, at the end of the day, first they look at the industry and then the financial, how big is it, what's its earnings, thing of that nature. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. And we realize that too, that while in the beginning we've got to be left, in the middle of it, we got to be left brain because it's all about numbers and the statistics and what's going on in the industry. At the end of the day, it's the client and the buyer and the seller and the interrelation of the management team, whether or not the deal's going to get done. I totally agree with that.
I just have one thing, but keep that in check. I wish I had a nickel for every top executive who's done 5 M&A deals here in the U.S., but they meet somebody named Pepe and Margarita over a margarita somewhere in Latin America, and they thought, oh, they're just the nicest guy, and they know the cousin of the president or something. Everybody in that bar knows the cousin of the president, but I mean, they get enamored, and all of a sudden they put all their normal processes that they would go through to buy a business or to do something. Oh, it's got to be different. Well, I'm just going to trust. And wait a minute, we still act like professionals here, right?
That's a really good point.
That's a very good point.
It relates to a question from Safir Denny, and his question is, and I think a couple of you touched on this, how important is timing for business sale? Does the broader economy or stock market bearishness have implications, and how do you mix that into the overall factor of when and at what price?
Well, I think you alluded to it. Just because the stock market could be up or down doesn't mean your industry, your valuation could be up or down. There are counter-cyclical companies out there that would do very well in a down economy. I think it's back to the preparation side. In the last 24 months, I had 3 clients sell. All 3 were unsolicited offers. There was a knock on the door. You got to be prepared, and they were prepared. So they knew the values, they knew where they wanted to go. They made some of the changes that needed to be made for the valuation recommendations, but you never know where that opportunity is going to come from. There's knocks on the door, you want to be prepared. As you just said, let's face it, there's some out there that are going to be sharks. It's like Shark Tank, right? You may think you're 10 million, they're going to think you're 2 million. If you haven't done your homework, you may end up, around like 2 million. You could leave money on the table. So you don't trust the verify, right? So
Trust and verify.
With an investment bank, one of the value adds that we do, and for a good one, is to bring in competing bids and vet all the potential prospects and know who's serious, who's not, whether or not they're friends with the president or not, or whatever. The point is, at the end of the day, it all comes about, do they have the wherewithal to buy the company, or do they have professional acumen to analyze your company and finally to run it and be your partner? So you got to be very, very careful.
So Doug, I deal with the healthcare industry a lot, so it does make sense to understand all types of risk, political risk, regulatory risk. In the stock market also, like, buy on rumors, sell on news kind of a thing. It does happen. So if you wait too long, the value proposition may completely vanish. So you may want to really understand with relation to where you are, what is the value proposition, and it may not go through forever.
This is a question from Asia, so thank you, all of those from Asia who are staying up later for this. Besides the people that we have here in the room, who else should I involve? And I actually wrote down 3 others. CPAs were mentioned. The due diligence can be done by a special kind of due diligence person, I think. That's at least my own experience, but let me know if I'm wrong. And then someone to do evaluation. Correct. On a periodic basis. Correct. So are those 3 also in addition to this group here, or are there other people that a buyer or a seller should involve?
Well, an investment bank will give the owner an evaluation, a rough evaluation, we call it a market valuation, but it's not something that they can take to court or use. It's not as thorough. I do recommend hiring an outside evaluation company. That way the owner will have a good input of what to fix. And secondly, if it gets down to it, you can use that negotiating with the buyer. Okay.
There's 5 different specialties right here in this room, plus the 3 that you mentioned. They all need to be at the table and at the same time. We talked about relationships and connections. They all got to work together well too. So I would make that investment in connecting early with the different specialties, plus the 3 you mentioned, and form that team. It really is a team approach.
And I would add to this, who leads? And you alluded to this. Who's leading? And I've worked with some of you all before, and there are moments when I may be leading. There are moments when I need to step back and say, really, the investment banker really ought to be leading at this point. This is an economic negotiated issue. Maybe the banker that needs to be leading at that point, or your personal wealth side person, because this is an implication now that relates to you and your family and your own personal tax situation. So in a team that's working together, that they're willing to step back and step in at the right moments, like you alluded to.
I'd like to add one more thing. And when I mention a CPA firm, don't use a CPA firm to give you your valuation. We see that a lot, and they're just going through the internet and taking their best guess. Use a real valuation company. And also, use a transactional attorney. You may have a corporate attorney. Use somebody like Mike during the transaction, during the negotiation. It'll help us get our job done quicker. It'll help the owner. And don't have somebody who wants to wordsmith, needs to understand deals.
Use second everything.
Yeah, I was going to say the owner really needs to understand all the professionals involved in this deal, as to when they come in, they get out, because it's the owner who's orchestrating as to when to bring in the right owner at right. So it's not that one person leads throughout the process. The process needs to be understood from beginning to end.
Okay. think this will be the last question. It's from Africa, so it's not too late there, late in the afternoon. It relates to serial entrepreneurs. And so how does it differ? How does a serial entrepreneur and working with one of them differ from the one-timers? And are they easier or more difficult?
This serial entrepreneur is doing what Kevin said. She or he is probably, after having done one, they're probably thinking exit on day one of their next one.
Exactly.
So that's a positive.
They also probably, oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. They've also, since they've done this, they understand what to expect. And going into it, they may have the exit plan, but they also know what they need to do. I need to put the right systems. I got to put the right people. I got to do the right. I got to have the right orbit of advisors. So they're locked in. They're prepared. They don't have to. There's no reinventing the wheel or even creating the wheel. They've done it. From our perspective, a lot of times what we like to do is actually partner with them. Then you have somebody who understands the process. We come in with, let's call it the yang portion. They have the yin. And we combine it together. Right? And it's much, much larger because then every single person here is part of that to make deals happen, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side. So the repeatability, muscle memory, it helps.
And we all like them because now you have money you just sold. What are we going to do next?
Exactly.
Hopefully successful. So it's
But for a lot of founder-run companies, they need to be prepared. They don't know the process. So hopefully we've helped.
How about a round of applause for this amazing and I hear the clapping in Africa and Asia and Europe as well. So thank you, gentlemen. That was really awesome. We do this on at least every week. We do it now more than every week. At the beginning of this year, we were doing it about once a month. So we've increased that amount. In 2019, we have even more planned from Global Chambers. So the next 3 events that we have like this are next Tuesday, the 20th. We have 3 or 4, I forget, exporters who are being successful with their work, and they're going to share tips on their business and why it's working and some challenges that they're having. On the 29th, we have a conversation about getting involved with construction and infrastructure projects around the world. And so we have people who are doing that and how to be able to tap in, including the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, which is one of, if you're in the United States, one of the key groups to monitor and to understand because they do a lot of reverse trade missions. And then on the 6th of December, we have kind of a combined Globinar in-person event. This one actually is going to be in Phoenix, Metro Phoenix at the Japanese Friendship Garden, but I don't think any of the speakers are going to be there. They're going to be in Japan and they're going to be in Washington, D.C., I think the 3 speakers. And so we have director at Jetro calling in from Tokyo on the 7th. We have the head of North American strategy for the Toyota Motor Company. And we have an amazing leader, Claudio Toyama, who works with leaders, and we're going to be talking about the workforce in Asia and how it's changing and modifying. And so if you're doing business in Asia, it's definitely something you should attend. So thank you very much again, panelists. Thank you, audience here at our headquarters and around the world. And we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thank you.